Bruce Murray is here. I've known this man for quite a while. I interned with him about 9 years ago, so now I'm going to make everybody feel old. And let's bring in Bruce now. You want to do that, Tom, or should I?
Yeah.
There he is.
Bruce. How you doing, guys?
Hi, Bruce.
You're making me feel old too. I was old when you started with me as an intern. Now I'm even older.
It's nice.
You haven't met us though. I'm Nick Cadera. That's Tom Albano.
Yeah.
Hey, how you guys doing? I see somebody. Wait, hang on a second. Tom has,
Yes.
I believe, something that says New York Rangers behind him.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Which disqualifies him from any conversation with me since I'm an Islanders fan.
Shots fired already.
Yeah.
Ow.
I felt that from here, Bruce.
I have Rangers radar. When I see anything that says NYR anywhere in somebody's room, I'm sorry.
I'm lucky I took my Brian Leach poster down
There you go. There you go.
So, Bruce, how's it going broadcasting from home during the pandemic?
You know, I was broadcasting at home for the most part before the pandemic. So it hasn't been that dramatic of a change. What's different is that I would be in maybe 3 or 4 times a month, whether it was for meetings or to see some people. I haven't been in our studios in almost 2 years. It's amazing. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they're closed until January anyway, at least from what I heard. But,
yeah, I don't know when I'll be back in our studios. I have no idea.
But if you can do the job from home, why not?
So, yeah, exactly.
All right, let's get into some NFL. So you have me, Jets fan, and those 2 Giants fans. Miserable.
All right.
Miserable start. So does New York football have any hope?
So it's funny you bring that up. First of all, I'm a Giants fan. My kids are Giants fans. So every day it's basically like a therapy session with them. And Rich Gannon this week on our show had a message for Giants and Jets fans, which was you have 2 choices, either to leave the state and find a new team to root for or stop watching football. Those were really the only 2 options he left us with. So given that those are the 2 options, and we're talking about a former MVP, what choice do we have but to follow one of those 2 leads? Listen, there's no simple answer to this. You know, in many ways, as bad as the Jets are and as uncompetitive as they are, and I may have made up a word there, you know, there's a mild sense of, well, at least we're only in year 1 of Zach Wilson and Robert Saleh. Just maybe we can, you know, find a way to build around them, and maybe we have the right head coach. You know, with the Giants, listen, you enter year 2 or 3 of any regime, whether it's a quarterback, a general manager, a head coach, which they're in, and you get these kind of results. I mean, you could be facing an off season where you change perhaps all of those positions. And you know what that's like in this league. You're basically going back to square one with no guarantees you'll have any of those answers.
What's the alternative, though, is what I would say. I mean, how much longer can we be subjected to this? Of course, I'm checking my privilege here because I was able. I've seen. I think they won 4 Super Bowls in my lifetime. So
okay,
it's not like I'm a Lions fan, but this is not for a sports organization that is prestigious as the Giants like to think they are. I don't know if this is acceptable.
I mean, it's just not even just the Giants and the Jets. I mean, you got the Mets who completely failed in Steve Cohen's first run. The Yankees are in the middle of an ultimate collapse. The Rangers are getting killed in the preseason. The Nets, we just got off on this whole thing about Kyrie Irving going through this COVID issue. I mean, New York sports seems pretty cursed about now.
Yeah, and you know, who knows what's going to happen with the Yankees, who were built to be the best team in baseball. But listen, the truth is, and you guys know this, especially when it comes to the NFL, it's really hard when you're transitioning out of a franchise quarterback. It's really hard. Make no mistake, anybody who thinks that the Patriots are going to make it seamless, they're not, okay? They struggled last year. You know, everybody was jumping all over Mac Jones to start the season. Let's see exactly where that one goes. You know, the Packers have done it seamlessly, but they're the outlier to all of this. You know, when the Buffalo Bills moved off of Jim Kelly, it's taken them 30 years to find an answer to that situation. This is a really tough league. I mean, it requires 3 things. It requires, obviously, a franchise quarterback, and then I think it requires a creative coach. Forget about young. People always talk about, I need the next young head coach, Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur and, you know, Joe Brady. It's not youth. Andy Reid's as creative as it gets, and he's not a young guy. You watch the Giants offense right now, and it just looks very stale. They don't put any pressure on defenses right now. And whether that's a simple change of Jason Garrett, and I've talked to guys in the organization, I know fans, you guys I'm sure think that's the answer to all their problems. I don't know that it is. I was talking to somebody who's very close to this organization yesterday, and he said, when Nick Gates is your best offensive lineman, okay, it tells you exactly what the rest of that group is like. When they said, their best offensive lineman went down, Nick Gates is not a great player. He's an average player, which tells you what the rest of that group looks like. They were in a building phase last year, and then in the offseason they said, wait, we've got job preservation. We think we're ready to turn the corner. Let's go out and sign Galladay. Let's draft Tony. And I think, look, I fell into the trap. I thought the personnel on this team looked really good, but there's a lot of holes on this football team. And even, the signing of Leonard Williams. Last year he was great. Is he an elite edge rusher? Probably not. And a lot of the good teams have those guys. So they may be further away than we think. And I don't know that there's a simple fix to them. The Jets are a completely different story, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, don't. I have nightmares every week. I have to watch Zach Wilson throw 4 picks every week. But let's move on to another situation. I look in Indianapolis with Marlon Mack and those trade rumors, and he's kind of out of place. Where do you see that situation ending up?
I think we're seeing, in this league, the luxury of having 2 really good backs. Look at what Cleveland has done. I think Minnesota, when Dalvin Cook went down, we wouldn't think of Madison as a frontline back, but you know what? They ran the same game plan, and he, has a great day on the ground, and I think that's important. I don't think there's any shortage of teams that could use a guy that would be second on the depth chart. Look, the Giants thought they answered it by signing Booker in the offseason. He's not even active. So to sit here and predict, look, second running backs, I don't want to say they're a dime a dozen. Marlon Mack is above average. He's a good player. But I think it's going to come down to whether it's a team that thinks they're a playoff team that wants some depth at the position, whether it's a team that's not getting enough productivity out of the guy that's up front. It's hard to circle a specific landing spot for him anytime soon, in my opinion.
So obviously we're in week 4, and the big game coming up this week is the Buccaneers against the Patriots. It's Tom Brady's first game in Foxborough as a Buccaneer. And coincidentally, around the same time, we have this book that's about to be released on the New England Patriots of the dynasty era and the relationships between Kraft, Belichick, and Brady, all the tensions behind the scenes. What do you make of this book that's going to come out?
Well, listen, I'm sure it's going to have some explosive stuff in it because you need to sell books. I don't know that there's going to be anything that is going to be earth-shattering in it. I think we all understand what went on behind the scenes. I don't think there was this massive desire on the part of Bill Belichick to force Tom Brady out of town. I personally don't. I think, I hate to say it, anybody that's been involved in a relationship for a long time, and I'm married for almost 30 years, there comes a time when you're like, I wonder if there's something better out there. And not if you're married, by the way. I hope my wife's not listening. I love my wife. but, you always think, well, maybe there's something more exciting out there. And, in marriage, you've got to make things work. In football, you can say, let me see if there's something better. I think Brady was frustrated with the way things were going in New England. I think Belichick, to some extent, when it came down to that Garoppolo situation, may have wanted to move forward with Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think he thought he had his quarterback of the future, and Tom Brady's time was going to end sooner than later, which, of course, we've learned is not the case. We know where Kraft sat in the situation. Obviously, I don't want to say aligning because it sounds like there's a division. He was a Brady guy. But, listen, relationships over time do break down. It just happens. So I don't think it's anything. I don't think Bill Belichick forced him out of town. I don't think Tom Brady hated everybody and wanted to leave. I just think after 20 years, they were just ready to kind of move on and find something else. And of course, we saw how it worked out for Tom Brady. And I think it's going to be a while before New England figures this whole thing out.
I don't know what standing that puts you in with Patriots fans. Because would that piss them off? I'm genuinely asking, Bruce.
Well, does that say? I mean, in what way does it anger them that Brady? Like, tell me what that means.
Does it mean that because it seems like the Patriots are not Patriots fans are not? They don't even know what a rebuilding season is. So, are we talking about denial on their part, or
Yeah, I listen. It's amazing to me. I think we're all old enough to remember before Tom Brady, the Patriots were a floundering organization.
Yes,
It's
they
not
were.
like they had great years on a regular basis. They went to the Super Bowl, lost to the Bears with Steve Grogan. That's a long time ago in the 80s. There's a generation of fans that have grown up, kind of like Yankees fans in the late 80s, into 2000, that have no idea what it's like to lose. I mean, they just don't. And the reality of this league is that, guess what? You're going to learn the hard way that it's just not that easy to kind of transfer out and maintain that level of excellence. The idea, look, Bill Belichick is a great coach. We love to throw out the term genius. I think he's a great coach. I don't know what it means to be a genius. Bill Walsh to me was a genius because created things that we never saw before in this league. Bill Belichick is a really good coach. He understands how to put good players in the right position to succeed. He's not an incredible evaluator. Their drafts haven't been phenomenal. They've tried a number of different things that haven't worked. And look, unless I'm wrong, if Mac Jones turns out to be a seamless transition, and by the way, anybody who's calling him the next Tom Brady, can we stop? Peyton Manning, if he was coming into the league right now, wouldn't be the next Tom Brady. You don't all of a sudden identify the second greatest quarterback of all time just because he looks the part. It's not easy. And that's where it starts. You better have that guy on the weekends. They weren't a good team last year. They made a major investment into free agency. I still don't see a roster that's built out with great football players. I think they're not coming to terms with it. I think they do live in denial. I think that's a good way to say it. But they're going to learn how hard it is to win in the National Football League on a regular basis very soon.
Speaking of the rich getting richer, talking about Brady, Richard Sherman on the Bucs roster. Are you surprised he's back this soon? Or is it normal, you think, for Brady?
Yeah, I mean, maybe in the first week that he signed, yes. And, let's see how many snaps he plays. Even he admitted when he signed that it's probably going to take him a week to get up to speed. But, I mean, this game today, too. In this business, when it's your job is also staying in shape. It's not like until they have a job, they sit at home on the couch eating a bag of potato chips. Football shape is different than shape. We know that. But, I don't think we'll see him on the field for a ton of snaps this week unless something, happens to the secondary where they're desperate. But, I think they'll use him as a situational player. Look, I think it's a good signing for that football team. He's still a good football player. He's a great guy to have in any locker room. It's just – you look at that Bucs team, and it almost looks like an old-timers game at times with Gronkowski and Brady and Sherman and Sen, Jason Pierre-Paul. But in the meantime, they've got some youth that helps them also. It's just a really good football team.
What I want to know is, has Richard Sherman worked out the personal issues that caused him to be released by the Niners in the first place? Because that seems to be the question that I don't think anybody's asking.
Yeah, and the only evidence we have comes from him. I mean, from his statements, claiming that he has dealt with some of the personnel issues and he regrets some of the personal issues and he's moved on from them. And look, only time will tell. I will say this. Look, I know he went through some difficult times in the offseason. I don't know Richard Sherman well. I've met him a couple of times, but I do know some people who know him well. I personally think he's a pretty good guy. Anybody who wants to paint him with this broad brush, he got in trouble, bad guy, I don't think he is. He's a smart guy. He's a guy that, has at times turned people off by his honesty, the way he sees things. We remember him a couple of years ago when he went to San Francisco representing himself. And, of course, there was a lot of criticism for the way that went. Look, the guys who have played with him have a great deal of respect for him, not only as a teammate, but for what he is inside the locker room. So I can't sit here and give you any kind of background on what may or may not be until it actually all comes out publicly. But he claims that, look, he's dealt with some of the issues and he's moved on from them.
So last week during the games, we had two extremely weird but exciting instances involving kickers. The first, we had Justin Tucker setting the NFL record with the game-winning field goal against the Lions, so I believe it was 66 yards. Matt Prater, right before that, was going for his own, and then ends up giving the Jaguars a NFL record 109-yard return in that win over the Cardinals. Which do you think was the more impressive?
Well, I think I have to go with Justin Tucker. I think if you would have had that return in the Jaguars game and it resulted in a win, maybe we'd feel a little differently about it. You remember the Auburn, Alabama situation, but my analogy was it's kind of like a guy making a phenomenal catch in a baseball game and then you lose the baseball game. When he makes it and it saves a baseball game, it goes down in history. You'll never forget it. When you lose the baseball game or it's not in a big moment, you go, yeah, who was that guy? He made a great catch, but I don't really remember it. The Tucker situation to me stands out for two reasons. Number one is because of it decided the outcome of the game. We're talking about a guy who had a Hall of Fame resume before he made that kick. This just adds to, there aren't a lot of kickers in the Hall of Fame. We know that. And there certainly aren't guys that go in when their name comes up the first time. He may be the first. Justin Tucker's going to come up when he retires. And you're going to go, how can we keep him out of the Hall of Fame? I don't care who's on that short list. And, you guys saw it. So you'll know what I'm talking about. It's kind of like swinging out of your shoes when you play golf. The odds of it going dead center in a fairway, not great. It's going to go right rough, left rough, whatever. Most times when you kick it that hard, it's either just getting in or, is it going to make it through on the left or the right? This was dead center. And I don't know what it is about Justin Tucker. If it was the Giants kicking that field goal, it would have hit the crossbar and bounced out. If it was the Jets, it bounces out. Justin Tucker, you hit the crossbar, it goes in, of course.
By the way,
he's a kicking goat.
Yeah, I don't know.
But we can't go without talking one more situation in Chicago, and I think it's accurate that the coach's name is Nagy because I think he's a little bit of a nag when it comes to naming his quarterback situation. What do you make of this whole mess?
That's a difficult one too. Again, I'll use the words of my co-host, who again was a former MVP in the league, Rich Gannon, who called it coaching malpractice this week. I don't know what the explanation is. I know what the explanation was, and all the football fans that said Nagy was doing this by design, he wanted him to fail. Let me tell you something. These guys want to win. Not only do they want to win every game, and there's only 17 of them, they want to keep their jobs. And going out there and doing that to a rookie doesn't help you keep your job. It's just really difficult to explain exactly why. Here's a guy that learned under Andy Reid. He understands situational football. And there are so many questions. They didn't run a game plan that allowed him to play to his strengths. They rolled him out twice in that game, I think. They didn't offer any extra protection. Once you're sacked 5 times or 6 times, you'd think you'd keep 2 tight ends in or a fullback in or something. You'd be chipping Myles Garrett. We didn't see that. You'd think you'd put Fields on the bench at some point after 5 or 6 sacks. I don't have an explanation for any of it. And you know what? Matt Nagy didn't provide one this week. He just didn't. So this is one of those things where we want to blame, and he's the easy guy to blame. I'm not saying he's not. But everybody thinks they have the answer to why it worked out that way. And without being in the meeting rooms, without understanding why they did certain things, I could not provide you a plausible explanation for why we saw what we did in Cleveland last week.
One last thing from us, another quarterback situation, Bruce. We heard reports and rumors this week that Eagles ownership has approved to try to get a trade for Deshaun Watson. Now we know the whole situation between the Texans and Deshaun, plus Deshaun's own personal issues over this past year. Should this be something that the Eagles do? What did they have to give up? And what about Jalen Hurts? He's looked good during the end of last season and the start of this season. Would he have to go to Houston in a trade like this?
Well, let's use Miami as an example because they were the first team that was in the sweepstakes. And the reports were that they're willing to trade him to Miami, but they don't want Tua in return, which you'd say, well, that makes no sense. But they evaluate Tua, and they may think they want to go in a different direction. And if they trade him, maybe they'll be in a position to draft a guy. I don't know what Houston thinks of Jalen Hurts. So to say that he'd go back in a deal, they may not want to take on Jalen Hurts and what he brings. They may just want to start fresh. If you're asking me, and by the way, look, much like the conversation in Miami, I'll say the same thing because I was an advocate of Tua's. But when you've got a chance to get Deshaun Watson, it's not about what about the guy we have. It's, are we getting better at the position? And Deshaun Watson's one of the top 5 guys at his position in the league, top 7, whatever you want. He's an MVP caliber player every year. If you can get him, go out and get him. And for those that say, well, he may be suspended, he may have to sit 8 games, you deal with it. He's under contract. If you lose him for 8 games this year, but you have him for 5 years, and you have one of the best players every Sunday, go get him. That's what I would say. There aren't too many teams right now that could say we're not better with Deshaun Watson as our quarterback, no matter who their quarterback is, except for, like I said, in Green Bay and Tampa Bay and, Kansas City. I mean, we don't have to go through all the names, but you know what I mean. Are you better in Denver with Teddy Bridgewater or Deshaun Watson? And Teddy Bridgewater's off to a good start. If you can get better at that position with a young player, go out and get him.
The great Bruce Murray, who I haven't seen in 9 years. It's been great catching up. SiriusXM NFL Radio, SiriusXM Blitz, noon to 3 p.m. Eastern, on Twitter at Bruce Murray NFL. Hopefully we can talk again sometime.
You know where to find me. At least now you know where to find me. There was a long delay with the first with the first reach out. Now you know how to get me.
I know how to get you, so we'll talk in the future.
Guys,
Thanks so
anytime.
much, Bruce.
See ya.
Bruce. Appreciate it.
All right, take care, guys.